It's me, Sassy Reads, and I am bringing you my February wrap-up at the end of March because I was lazy. So I read, I don't even know how many books in February. I've got my computer with my stats here. I read a total of 15 books in February, which is kind of low. I have noticed last year in 2020, I was like on this high of reading. And then January hit and I like went down from like reading over 20 books to 19, February 15, March, maybe a little bit more than 15 or just the same. But I always get in a reading slump from March, but that's a different story for our March wrap up. So February was relatively decent. I read a total of 4,291 pages, so not too bad. I listened to 12 and a half hours of audiobooks. My average rating was around a 4.3-ish, and then I acquired 32 books that month. That's why y'all don't see me doing book hauls. Maybe I will make like a fun video and just show you guys all the books that I've been accumulating. I ain't got no chill. I read 2 library books and 3 own voices books. I read 1 fantasy book, 6 horror books, 3 mysteries, 2 poetry, and 1 thriller, 11 adult, and 4 YA. By race, if we're gonna break down that way, I read 2 Asian authors, or 2 books by an Asian author, because I think it was by the same Asian author actually. 1 black author, 1 Mexican author, and 1 mixed, who one of them that I read is half Jewish, so I counted that for mixed. And then LGBTQ authors that I read this month, Jose Luis Zarate, Michael McDowell. I'm pretty sure Courtney Summers is in the spectrum for LGBTQ. I think I've heard she's asexual, but I don't remember where I heard that from, and I can't find the interview or anything. So if I'm completely off base, please correct me. But I just threw her up there because I think I have heard when Sadie was released that it was own voices for Ace Rep. And then Rose Xiaobo, who is gender fluid and uses they, them. So if you're going to talk about what big teeth, make sure that you're using the right pronouns for the author. So here are all the books that I read in February. You know, the last book I read in January was The Elementals by Michael McDowell. And so I finished it and I was like, man, I've read a great horror novel, but you know what I really wanted? And you're going to be like, well, why didn't you just wait for the new Akator book? Because I wanted it right then and now, and I wanted a good fairy story, like a good fairy romance, and like I got that. I read An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good time. I gave this one 4.25 stars. This isn't my favorite fairy story. Obviously, I didn't give it 5 stars. But it has a lot of elements of the fae that I love. And I think this is the autumn court or spring court. What kind of prince is he? He's a prince of some court. And I liked Rook, okay? I liked him. I liked Isabel has this ability to paint. And the fairies are obsessed with kind of collecting trade from humans, and the trade is normally like art or cooking or clothes, stuff that they can't do because fae cannot create anything. And it's just, I really liked that. I also really liked their little romance. There was sexual tension, there was chemistry. I liked it. I thought it was cute and fun. However, I would say like this last part was very rushed, and I was like, oh, if we had like, I don't know, I want to say like 50 to 75 more pages, this would have felt more fleshed out and would have probably been a 5-star for me. But it went by too fast, and the build up, the conclusion wrapped up way too nicely, and it just didn't fit for the time that was allotted, because like all of this was like build up, and then all of this was like boom, 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 and it was like too much. Pacing needed to be overly, spread out a little bit more. And then I do have to give it to Rogerson, though. She's great at world building, so this is a huge world builder. If you're interested in fairy world building, I liked how she did it. I enjoyed it. It kind of reminded me of a mix of Ash and A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I think it more fit Ash by Melinda Lowe, because if you haven't read Ash, that is such a great fairy book. Like, not enough people talk about it. I had to read it for a young adult class and a fairy tale class the same week when I was in college, and I was like, wow, God, like, you're just aligning so I don't have to read it 3 or 4 times. And y'all, I remember it was raining, and I sat down and I read like 100 pages of that book in 30 minutes. Ash by Melinda Lowe is so good. And this was just as readable as that, just as accessible. So I definitely recommend this if you're a fan of Ash. Also, if you're a fan of, ACOTAR. But I think that you would like the character development more if you're more of a fan of Ash than ACOTAR. So yeah, that's one that I read. The next book that I read was The Route. I'm going to say Route because I'm from the South. The Route of Ice and Salt by Jose Luis Zarate. Zarada? I think it's Zarada. I gave this one 2 stars, which I'm so sad about. Okay, so interesting concept. This book is a retelling of the people from Dracula. Look, I'm going to grab my copy, okay? So this book, Dracula, has a voyage where Dracula is put on a ship, and then everyone on the crew dies except for the captain, who goes crazy, right? This is a retelling of that captain and the voyage and the slow descent into the journals and the madness of the captain. This is written by a Mexican author, and this was a huge book. If I remember correctly, it was the 90s when it was published in Mexico, and it was one of the first books to be published in the horror genre by an LGBTQ author. And so vampirism in this book has a lot to do with homosexuality and the feeding and the eroticism of it. So Poppy Z. Brite actually did a really good essay at the end that I really enjoyed, and I really like Poppy Z. Brite's stuff. I think he is a fantastic author, but the thing that didn't work for me for The Route of Ice and Salt was the main character. He was so skeevy, and not skeevy in a way that even though you hated him, you were interested. He just made me so incredibly uncomfortable that I hated it. I was to the point where I was just get me out of this book. I can't, I have no problem connecting to horrible characters. Exquisite Corpse, love it. The Troop, love it. I love horrible characters because they make for good stories. But he was the type of horrible character with no build up of a good story, and it just I think it was because it was told from the diary perspective. I feel like this would have been a much more successful novel for me if it had been from his point of view. So I gave that one 2 stars, and I got an ARC from NetGalley. So thank you to the publishers for letting me read that. I'm really excited though that I was able to read such an important novel for the Mexican LGBTQ plus community, because I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, so it's good exposure. Good to learn more cultures. The Grief We're Given was the next book I read in February. It's by William Bortz. It's a poetry collection. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it. I connected with a lot of the poems that were in it. And it was just overall good. So 4 stars for me for a poetry collection is really good. That's normally above average for me, because I normally give 3 to 3.5 for poetry. If you get anything above a 4 from me for poetry, that means I really love it, and I don't do that often, but 4 is pretty solid. Recommend. Speaking of a poetry collection that got over 4 for me, let me tell you about American Melancholy by Joyce Carol Oates. 4.5 stars. We love it. Me and Joyce Carol Oates, we have an interesting relationship. I read Beast by her, and a short story called, I think, McDowell. And we're hit or miss. I love Beast. I thought that book was weird. It was a little much, but I liked it. McDowell could care less. But her poetry, I really like. That's what I've discovered. I really like her poetry. I particularly like what she did in American Melancholy, with showing us a lot of psychological experiments and behavioral and educational experiments that are actually very famous and a part of kind of like the American history without you really knowing it until maybe you go to college and take like a psychology class or an education class, and then you see like how this is just basically shaped certain ways that we work as a culture in America. So I really enjoyed that collection. It was also just, I don't know, it felt very melancholy, but it had this really great tone to it that I really, really connected with throughout. So definitely recommend American Melancholy if you're looking for a really good poetry collection. The next book that I read was for my Michael McDowell video, KT. I gave this one 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It's a good one. My video is still in progress. This is coming, you guys. I will share my full thoughts soon. Then I read The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. You know, the Ruth Ware, the one that everyone's obsessed with. This is my third Ruth Ware. First Ruth Ware was The Death of Mrs. Westaway. Could care less about that one. You could take it or leave it. I didn't care for it. I read One by One, I think in November last year, and I had a lot of fun with that one. One by One, really, really enjoyed it this time around as far as a mystery goes. I know a lot of people hated it because they were like, this is so obvious. And I was like, I wasn't here to be shocked. I was here to see where the story unfolded. That's the point of a mystery, where you're so secluded like in One by One. However, The Turn of the Key is a book that everyone loves on BookTube. It's kind of like the darling of the thriller mystery, especially if you're talking to or referring to Ruth Ware. Like, it's just going to be recommended. Well, I liked it. I gave The Turn of the Key 4 stars. I liked the build-up. I liked the house setup. I listened to the audiobook, so it was really cool to like hear the house doing all these creepy things, like turning on all the lights and everything, and it was interesting. However, my issue is the ending. It was so abrupt, so unfulfilling for what I wanted and where it was gonna go and what it could have done. And I was just like, that's it? That's all we get? I want like 20 more pages with more background, with more understanding. Because yes, you concluded the mystery, but I didn't feel satisfied. So, unsatisfied. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm super picky when it comes to mystery thrillers. I think I give probably 5 stars to about 3 to 5 thrillers a year. And that's like when I was reading 100 books. So if I read about 200 in a year, it may be 10 max. It just depends. And I don't consider horror to fall into the thriller or mystery category, even though some thriller mysteries have horror elements. It's a whole thing. But I'm picky. My favorite thriller from last year in 2020 was The Sundown Motel, which if you haven't read, like, look, I have this book right here on my book of the month shelf. This was like the best thriller mystery I read in 2020. I think about it all the time, and I want to reread and re-listen to it because that's how much I love it. And this is good. The Turn of the Key has a lot of good elements, but it didn't work for me in terms of reveal. And when it comes to reveal, I'm either really pleased or really unsatisfied. And that time I wasn't unsatisfied, I was unfulfilled. So 4 stars, but I am interested in reading more Ruth Ware. I don't know if I want to read her older stuff though. Like the Woman in Cabin 10, I think I'm good. But maybe. We'll see. Never say never. Then I read A Great Cloud of Witnesses, a study who lived by faith, a study in Hebrews 11 by Trillia J. Newbell. I didn't know this, but I own like Enjoy by her, and I think a couple other books by Trillia J. Newbell. Super exciting because I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I owned anything by her, and I like her writing. This was A Great Cloud of Witnesses is a small little Bible study on chapter 11 in Hebrews, and it looks at basically all of the Hall of Fame people. That's what it's called, the Hall of Fame. People of great faith from that chapter. Moses' mother, Rahab, Noah's grandfather, who's like mentioned in one line and throughout the whole Bible, but still somehow made it into the Hall of Fame, which I just think is really cool. You know, just like those little sprinklings of knowledge that you normally don't think about. I thought she really did a good job of bringing it to the table. I would have loved for this to be like a book instead of a Bible study, though, so that's why it's 4 stars instead of higher for me. But I loved her writing, so I'm looking forward to reading Enjoy. My like Christian shelf is all the way back there in that corner. It's like a little cube section, and it's overflowing. I've run out of space, but I'm not reading enough Christian books to run out of space. This is my dilemma. I can't stop buying them. The next book that I read was The Project by Courtney Summers. I pre-ordered this book. I was rudely rejected on NetGalley. No, I'm joking. I knew I was probably going to get rejected. But I love Courtney Summers. Like, I love her. I have a whole little section over there. The only Courtney Summers book I've yet to read is her very first novel, her debut, Cracked Up to Be. And I have it sitting on my shelf. And I bought a copy for my classroom, even though I haven't read it yet, because I know it's that good. I love Courtney Summers. I've been a stan of hers since I was in middle school, and I took the LEAP test in 7th grade or 8th grade, and I read Some Girls Are after finishing it. Oh my God, love her. Anyway, let's not gush just about Courtney Summers. Let's gush about The Project. I give this 5 stars. I know that this will be a hit or miss for a lot of people, especially if you're looking for a cult novel. Like, you want to go into a cult and you want to, I don't know, have a thriller adventure story. This is not it. This is a deconstruction character story. What? I don't want this. Get off my computer. Yes. Okay, this is a deconstruction character story. I just said I don't want it. Leave me all these ads. I don't want that. Trying to get me to buy a VPN. I don't want one right now. Leave me alone. So, this is a deconstruction of characters, 2 sisters, Lo and B. I got their names mixed up. Lo and B. And their parents died in a horrible accident, and Lo woke up in the ICU as a sole survivor of the car crash. B is the older sister who has to deal with the guilt of losing her parents while being at a party, and then, you know, having to be there for her sister, even though she's a teenager. She's like 18 or 19 at the time of the car accident, and she doesn't know what to do. And one day, when she's given up on her sister and she's in the hospital chapel praying, a predator, not a man, a predator comes up to her and offers her, I guess, the right to something, right? And next thing you know, she is trapped in his cult. And it's all about the project, which is his cult. His cult that is not a cult. It's supposed to be a religious group that has buildings set up to help you get out of homelessness, poverty, abusive relationships, sex trafficking, whatever. But really, they want you to come to their cult. And it's such a big thing that most people are like questioning it, like, is this a cult? And so Lo goes to write this journal expose on this cult, and you know it's gonna happen. Like, it's hinted at from the very first page that they're all sucked into it. And so next thing you know, we're following not 1 but 2 sisters trapped in a cult. What a tangled web we weave. And it's so good. And while Lo is, you know, doing this digging, she's like, where's my sister? Why haven't I seen my sister? Why can't I call my sister? Where's my sister? And so we have this great dual narrative of B before and Lo during. And I loved it. I cried. I sobbed. This ending hurt. I knew it would hurt because Sadie hurt. And Some Girls Are hurt. This Is Not a Test hurts. And then, what's that other book that I love so much? Oh my God. Not Cracked Up to Be. All the Rage. All the Rage hurt. So I knew this was going to hurt, and it hurt. It made me sad, but it's so good, and I really loved it. I don't think it's my favorite Courtney Summers. If I were to rank this, it'd probably be my third favorite. I think that's where I'm going to go. After I read all the Courtney Summers books, I'll do a Courtney Summers video because, you know, I got to represent. I love her. I think she's awesome. Next book that I read was a DNF. Well, I didn't technically DNF'd it. I like flipped to the end. So I read it. It's Samson by Eric Wilson. This is just a novelization of the film. Still haven't watched the film. I read Delilah Treacherous Beauty in January. Love that. So good. Angela Hunt did a great job at novelizing Delilah and Samson. This was trash. So many just historical inaccuracies. Kind of like weird things that are not based in Jewish culture put in part of Jewish culture, and then vice versa with like the Philistines. It was weird. I didn't care for it. I'm gonna get rid of it, give it to somebody who may absolutely love it. I could care less. So yeah, 1 star, DNF, I guess. I read the end and like the first 100 pages, so I'm counting it. Then I read, this one's fun, Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. Look, I just think this cover is so cool, okay? It's like the knockoff version of IKEA. It's called an Orcs store, okay? And so, like, my favorite thing is the chapters in this book have, like, furniture. And the furniture has to do with where these ghosts in the store are kind of, like, hiding or playing with the workers who are trapped in the store. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the book, a portal is open. I'm not going to spoil anything. Just know portal is open. And then after the portal is open, okay, I think this was like the last normal chapter. That one's not scary. I want to show you like a scary one. Okay, this is a great one. Here is after a portal is open. And we enter furniture. Look at that furniture, okay? That's like a treadmill with spikes on it, so you can walk on it. And it says you can walk forever and never arrive, thanks to the infinite loop of the obliteric treadwheel. A range of possibility unfolds when you remove a destination from the equation and let the journey last forever. And so the furniture becomes like torture devices, which connects to the history of where the store was built. And I just had so much fun. I love Grady Hendrix. Paperbacks from Hell, love it. The Southern, what is it called? The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I had so much fun with that book. So I really loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was fun. We were trapped here in the snow. You guys remember in February when like the entire like southern United States almost died of like losing heaters and stuff? I wasn't in Texas, so I didn't have it that bad, but it was pretty bad here in Louisiana, and a lot of people did lose their power, but not on the level of the people in Texas. And I read a lot. This was one of the books that I was reading to keep warm. It was so much fun. I had such a good time, especially because we already had off that week for Mardi Gras. And we were supposed to go back for Ash Wednesday due to like COVID instead of having Ash Wednesday off like we normally do. And then I was reading this book all day for Ash Wednesday. And I was like, yes, I don't have to teach today. I can just read. And it was a great time because who doesn't want to read about people trapped in a knockoff IKEA with ghosts? It was fun. And I also liked the ending and how it can kind of set up for a sequel. And I love the characters. Even though they're like stereotypical sometimes, they're so much fun. They're super diverse. There's so wide a variety of characters that could work in the store, and all of them show up, and it's just such a good time. So definitely recommend Horror Store for horror fans, especially because Grady Hendrix is like a real horror fan, and you can tell he really loves the genre enough to poke fun at it, but like have fun and make it his own. And that's why I love his books, because he knows the genre well and he thrives with it, but also he does so many different things with it. So I have 2 more books by him that I haven't read. Excited. And then there's one that I've pre-ordered that's coming out this year. Can't wait. The next book I read was The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I gave The Guest List 3 stars. I could care less about this book. I get why people love the guest list. I do. I like the reveal. That was the successful part of this novel, where the turn of the key didn't have a great reveal for me and didn't feel satisfying. This book was so unsatisfying. That reveal was so good. And I was like, dude, I still feel how excited I am when I think about the reveal, because the reveal, number one, made sense, and two, was so well done and brilliantly crafted that I was like, oh wow, none of the characters that I guessed were in the wheelhouse, because once I started putting the pieces together, by that point it was already being revealed, and I enjoyed that. I liked that. And so that's why I'm giving it 3 stars instead of lower, because the reveal paid off. It made it worth it to read it. The next book was a reread for me. I reread the Mermaid Saga Collection, Volume 1 by Rumiko Takahashi. I love this book so much, you guys. She's a lady who wrote Inuyasha. She's awesome. She has great stories. These stories in these collections are magnificent, beautiful. The last story, still magnificent, still beautiful, still made me sob. In fact, I started sobbing the minute I looked at the first page of it, because I already knew where the story was going. And I also connected with stories that I hadn't connected with as fully with before. And I just realized that this book is perfect. There's not one story in here that I don't love. So not only is this a short story collection, but it's beautifully drawn, has beautiful storylines. It hits on so many emotional punches and levels that I can't believe that more people don't read this or know about Mermaid Saga. And it pains me that it stops after 8 or 9 chapters, because I'm like, oh my god, could you imagine if it spanned as long as Inuyasha? How beautiful this series would be. This horror mermaid series is so beautiful. I just love it. And so, of course, my pre-order of Volume 2 came in. So, yes, I read Mermaid Saga Volume 2. Sadly, didn't love it as much as Volume 1, because Volume 1, I'm going to just be obsessed with forever. I already know that this is, one of my favorite books of the year. I've read it twice. I stand by it already. It's probably not my favorite book of the year, but it's, gonna be top 5. This one, I did enjoy a lot. I really love the art in here. I love the stories. The last story made me mad because I turned the page and I said, we don't get a conclusion. We don't have a wrap up. We have absolutely nothing. And that made me furious, because this is the last chapter and there's no conclusion. It's there could have been more, but there's not, and I want more. And even the back, y'all. Look at that art. Beautiful. I just loved it, and I really appreciated it. Have you guys noticed, and I don't know, maybe if you're a manga horror fan, I read a Junji Ito collection last year, and I think August, called Venus in the Blind Spot. And there was a story in the Junji Ito collection where there was a lady who, it had something to do with the doll. The doll, there were a couple of doll stories in that collection, but the doll was alive or something like that. There was a doll in this story, and it had to, of course, do with the mermaids and stuff, but I really liked how they did that. Is that a thing in Japan, doll horror? Is that a huge cultural thing? I'm just curious, because I like it. I think it's interesting. It's fascinating. And I'm obsessed. Look at how beautiful. Art. Love it. So good. I mean, come on. Go read these books. If you love Inuyasha, if you love mermaids, if you love horror, if you like scary mermaids, if you like short stories, all the things. Basically, I'm just listing all the things that I love, but maybe you love those things too. And so Mermaid Saga should be for you, because it's really good. And I don't care for manga as much as I used to. I used to be a big manga fan back in the day. I'm slowly getting more into it. I think the next series I want to delve into is Angel Sanctuary. But if you can give me a manga series that I'm super invested in and 100% can't stop reading, that's when you know it's good. and that's the Mermaid Saga for me. And I'm sad because that's all I get, just 2 volumes. I need more. Next book that I read was The Initial Insult by Mindy McGinnis. This is actually my first Mindy McGinnis book. I actually own a bunch of her books. If you would like me to do a reading vlog on her, let me know, because that could be fun. The Initial Insult. Hey, are you an Edgar Allan Poe fan? Are you a Cask of Amontillado fan? Are you Are you a fan of The Mask of the Red Death? Are you a fan of his short story Cat? Are you a fan of just Edgar Allan Poe, Annabel Lee, The Raven, all those things? Well, then yes, you should read The Initial Insult, because it's like this huge culmination of Edgar Allan Poe stories. It is a Cask of Amontillado retelling, Mask of the Red Death retelling, and Cat retelling, all mixed up in one. We have 2 girls, Felicity and Tress is getting her revenge. Felicity Tornado, I think that's her name, knows what happened to Tress Montresor's parents, and she is going to figure out what happened to her parents. Why did they go missing? Why can't anyone find them? So do you know what she's going to do to make sure she gets the answer? She's going to bury her friend alive in the bottom of an old house, Cask of Amontillado, during a Halloween party, where it just so happens a giant panther from her family zoo is on the loose and prowling around on the attack during the party. Oh, and of course you're like, but how does the Mask of the Red Death fit in? Hello? The whole town is being struck by a deadly plague, and it also seems like a bunch of them are starting to die at this Halloween party. Fun. It was so much fun. I listened to the audiobook. Thank you, NetGalley, for sending me the audiobook, because I had so much fun listening to this. The Initial Insult was fun. It was good. I'm already ready for the sequel, even though I know I'm going to have to wait a whole nother year because I read it early. But I can't wait for it. I'm excited. I love the Cask of Amontillado. It's my favorite Edgar Allan Poe story. So this was like so much fun for me. I loved it. It was fast paced. It was really good. The ending, oh my gosh, the ending was painful and heartbreaking and so unsatisfying, because I know the sequel is going to be there. So I'm like, what's going to happen? I need the sequel. I just think it's a brilliant idea to have this town where everyone's connected or named with an Edgar Allan Poe story, and everything that happens in the town is connected to that. That's cool. Love that. The next book that I read, I got an arc of this from NetGalley, but I loved it so much that I bought a copy of it when I saw it at Books A Million, because this is my favorite cover of the year. What Big Teeth by Rose Jabo. Rose Jabo is awesome. They're awesome. They can write their butt off. This reminded me a lot of Angela Carter's writing style. I've only read A Company of Wolves by her, but I loved it. Like, I loved that story. And this has that same dark fantasy horror element to it. We follow Eleanor, and Eleanor is on her way back from a boarding school. She's run away. She wasn't supposed to leave her boarding school, and she's coming back home to her werewolf family. And she's very different from her werewolf family. They don't really fit in, but you should also know that her mom isn't a werewolf. Her mom can't leave the water. And so when her grandmother, Persephone, ends up dying mysteriously, Eleanor's other grandmother pays a visit. And what big teeth she has. She is a monster. Woo! So, if you like dark fantasy, if you like twisted fantasy stories, if you like gender fluidity and sexuality in your stories, if you like fantasy that is light but fairy tale-esque, this is for you. I loved it. I thought it was so good. The only critique, even though this is 5 stars for me, the only critique that I have is that I wish more of it would have been told in Grandma Persephone's point of view, especially like when we got like her ghost point of view, and I was like, dang, this woman was cutting up. Like, she, spoiler, but maybe not, because this may get you like interested in it, but her grandma like had like an open relationship where like her and her husband were both cheating on each other with the same man in a YA novel, y'all. I was like, this is scandalous. She's so fascinating. Like, who doesn't want to read more from her perspective? And I loved her. Eleanor was kind of boring sometimes, but the story itself is interesting to make up for Eleanor's lame character. At least for me. Like, I was so invested in the story and the plot and the side characters. I love the side characters. That I didn't mind that Eleanor was kind of like a little flaky and crusty, and like she was a little stale. You know, if you leave like bread out for too long and you're like, it still tastes good, but I feel like I shouldn't have left it out for this many hours. That's Eleanor's character. Like, I was like, she probably should have just like been eaten quicker. Eaten. What big teeth. But I love the ending. I love the message. I love the story. I love the cover. I am obsessed. And you know what? I hope that Rose Salbo, I hope that you write many more fantasy horror books, because you have a knack for them. And this was good. And I just love this cover. Like, I could sit here and stare at this all day. Like, look at how the flowers, the teeth, the face, the imagery and symbolism for the story of the monster, of her grandmother, of how her family turned into werewolves. It's cool, okay? Because they weren't like bitten or anything. It's cool. I'm not going to spoil it. You go read it. You enjoy it. I loved it. It was so good. So that was the last book that I read in February. Those were all my books. On my blog, I like to rank my 5-star reads, so why not do that here too? That'll be fun. So I only gave 5 stars to 3 books in the month of February. It just so happens that I own all 3 of those physically. I would rank them like this. What Big Teeth would be at 3, Mermaid Saga would be at 2, and The Project would be at 1. Although these 2 are like really interchangeable for the number 1 position. Okay? Today I may feel this way. Tomorrow I may feel this way. But yeah, so these are the 3 books that I recommend the most out of the month of February. Go read them. Check them out. Let me know what you think about these books. Let me know if you've read them. Let me know what your favorite book of February was. Convince me to read it. I love recommendations. So I will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye, and happy reading.